Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, what should be the fifth and final part in this series of videos on how to strip and restore old miniatures. To be fair, it's gone on a bit longer than I thought, but I really hope you've enjoyed the series and I hope you're getting something from it. So of course, yes, I am using my Raiders stroke Ravagers to make this video, but hopefully some of the tips would apply to other models and like I said, be useful to you. So I'm pretty much finished now. I'm on the last legs of just tidying things up. So in the previous video, I did all the magnetization work on all of the gunners and the guns, and if you're interested in any of the other videos, I will put a link in the description below. So we started off obviously stripping the models, and then we did some plastic card work, we've done some magnetization work, and in this video I want to look at just doing the final touches as such. So I'm going to have a look at doing the front section on here. I'm going to look at doing the underneath section on here because one of them doesn't have it and one's backwards and one's forwards, and I need to work out which way I want to go, and then finally I need to work out the bases, and also what I'm going to do with these sections here, because these are broken and obviously we've got these on here, the others don't have it, so I want to work out a system and what I'm going to do for those. So I'm going to take all the magnets off of these, take all the gunners off, and then I'm going to go into my bits box, see what bits that I have to do the final work, and we'll go from there. Right, okay, so I had a look in my bits box and managed to find a few Raider type bits. I don't have that many bits in my bits box because obviously it's quite a new army, but I do have a few bits and pieces to hopefully use. And the first thing I want to have a look at is on this one here, which I'd previously obviously purchased, and it had these sections glued on and these, which of course are currently broken. So first of all, I looked at this front section because this was quite familiar. I used these bits for my Venom conversions that I converted my Vipers from. Now I do have 3 of these bits, which is obviously one short, not quite enough to make the other 2 Raiders into the same design as this one. However, I did manage to find, or I did have, these sections here, which you may remember I took off of the Raider stroke Ravager, and I thought that those are actually pretty close to one of those. So I was thinking, as I've got 4 of these, I was potentially going to use these at the front of the other 2 Raiders. So that was the Raider section sorted. It also meant that I had some of these left over, so if I did do another Venom conversion, I've still got a couple there for another conversion. So that was that. So then I wanted to work on the back broken section. Now I did actually find that I had the pieces that had already broken off, these pieces here, which are obviously supposed to go on there. Now they've obviously snapped off, and I thought about potentially gluing them back on, but I think they'll be a little weak. They're quite sticky out and vulnerable, and also I don't have enough, because I'm trying to get all my Raiders to look pretty similar. I don't have enough of these pieces, I only have 1 to be able to redo all of them. So I abandoned that idea, so the only option really for me is to take these sections off, and that is what I'm going to attempt to do next. So let me just zoom out a bit so that everything's in view. Okay, so these have been glued on with plastic glue, which obviously means that they've been melted together. Now if it was super glue, I could potentially just rip it off, but with plastic glue that's not going to happen, so I'm going to have to use my clippers. Now this is something you have to be very careful doing. I have tried to put it off, and there is a little gap in between there, which I'm going to hopefully be able to use as my advantage, but ultimately I'm just going to have to basically just gradually clip it down. So that is what I'm going to do. So let's get some clipping done. Okay, so as you saw there, that big bit just came off. So now it's just a case of this under section. Now if you're really lucky, if you get the pliers in the right place, it may just like come off. It depends how well it's been glued. If you start to get stuck, obviously the knife can come in handy, and what you need to try and do is just encourage it, let's say, off just by probably just putting a little mark in there. Obviously when you're using knives, be very, very careful. Try not to cut towards yourself if you can. That is very dangerous. It will take a bit of work, just take your time. It's a bit awkward as well because I don't want to damage anything else whilst I'm taking it off. Hey, there you go, that is off. Doesn't look particularly pretty under there, but we can tidy that up quite nicely. Obviously I'm pretty lucky here because it's obviously on the underside of this vehicle, so it's not going to make too much difference. But yeah, I'm going to easily be able to just go in now with the knife and just clean it up, basically get that plastic off like so, and then just make it flat. So that's a really good job done, very happy with that one. What I'm going to do now is off camera, I'm just going to do exactly the same for the other side. Okay, so I'm back, and a slight disaster, which to be fair can happen. So although I was incredibly careful, basically the plastic was so old and sort of brittle that this piece just broke off, and although I do have some of the piece, a little bit of it's disintegrated on this section, so it's not a case of being able to just like glue that back into position. So basically that didn't work. So these things happen, and we just have to move straight on and try and solve it. So I'm going to go back to these pieces here, the original ones, which as I said snapped off. I've got two of these, so they are effectively surplus. So what I was thinking was I might just tidy this break up, this cut, and then possibly put this in here somehow just to make up for it. I think it could work. So that is what I'm going to work on next. So there's no choice here, I'm just going to have to take this like random piece of plastic off. So I'm just going to cut that off there and then just tidy that up. It's one of those things, when something like that happens, you can't get too stressed about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Just thinking of an alternative, just use your imagination. You see, it's just a case of having a fiddle really, and just working out what you think would be the best option. I'm still thinking my original idea of just having it like that, probably the best one. Okay, I'm going to take my time on this. I'm going to have a little think about it and see exactly what I can come up with. More to come. Okay, so I'm back. I had a good old play with this and I just couldn't make it work to a satisfactory level. So I decided in the end to use one of these bits. I know I was going to keep them, but you know, these things happen. So I've decided to use one of these and I've cut it up and made this little piece, which I'm going to basically glue there. And I think that looked pretty cool. You you know, it's going to be a bit different from the others, yes, but like I said, these things happen, and you just gotta run with it. So that is what I'm going to do. So I've done one, so I've got obviously another one here, so I need to cut that out to the same shape as that one. So that is my next task. So I've got a rough shape there. I'm now going to have to go in and cut this piece off so that it matches the other side. Just do one bit at a time, we don't want any more disasters. Very spiky, these things. You've got to be very careful as well. You know, when you're manhandling your models, not to break anything else and make them worse, of course. Okay, so now it's just a case of getting this to match in with the other one. Now what I did with this one is I had to flatten, like this sticky out piece. There's a sticky out piece there, so just flatten that off. Right, there you go. So they're going to be basically something like that. I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm now going to glue them into position. Just tidy this one up just to make sure it matches. So I'll glue this one on first and then just double check this one, change it if I need to until they're basically as equal as I can get them. So I'm going to do that and then I'll be back. Now one thing I had to take into consideration when putting these side pieces on was that this piece, which obviously is magnetised on for the Ravager, still magnetises into position. So I couldn't do anything that was going to block this, so that did limit me slightly as well. But on the whole, I am very happy with that. I think that looks pretty cool. It's quite useful really that the one that's broken was the one with the old warriors on, because I have 3 raiders, obviously 2 with the new warriors and 1 with the old ones, and I have a unit of old warriors that can like go in this, so it sort of works out that this is slightly different from the others anyway. So I'm really happy with that, to be fair. I think that's been rectified. I certainly got away with that, and as I said, these things happen. You just have to run with it, don't panic, and just come up with an alternative solution. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sort out the front bits. Like I said, I've got these metal ones which I have literally just filed just to clean them up a little bit, and I'm going to glue these onto the front of these ones. So they are literally going to, not like that, I'm literally going to super glue into position like that. Should look pretty cool and make them look a little bit different from the others. So let's get on and do that. Right, that's one. Works out pretty well, gives it an extra depth and dimension to the Raider as well, so I'm happy with that. So let's continue that with the other one. Okay, so that's that done. Just give that a few minutes to dry and we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, so that is all dried now. So looking pretty good. So the next stage that I want to sort out is the front section. So I have one of those on that one. I have one of those on that one, which is all skew-if, and the other one has one of those. So all totally different because this is forward, this is back, even though it's the same piece. So what I'm thinking is that I might keep this one different, as it's got these sections on the back and these haven't. It's going to be a different look to it anyway, so I might as well just go all out and make it totally different. So I am going to keep that one in position, but I'm going to put that one onto here because I do have some spare ones. So these two will have that type of front, this one will have that one, be slightly different. Now the one that's already on this, although it's there, it is all totally skew-if, it's not straight, so I'm going to try and take that off. So it's again going to be awkward, but just gradually let's break it off. There you go. And then we're going to have to go in and just flatten it out a little so that we can obviously get the replacement in and hopefully straight. Right, there you go. So just one bit at a time until it's out, and there we are. So I'm going to put that into position there. I'm going to do the same for the other one. I'm going to use my plastic glue. Actually, before we do that, let's just make sure that these edges here are nice and flat and also glue free. Okay, so plastic glue. I'm going to put some plastic glue on both surfaces. Just give them a few minutes to start to melt the plastic a bit. That one, and okay, so this one actually I forgot, I've got to take this piece out, so I'm going to quickly do that. That won't be too much of an issue. So that's that, and again just tidy that up slightly. Right, I'm going to glue at the front. Okay, so give that a minute and then I'll be back. Okay, so that's just a couple of minutes later. So I said hopefully now these should be all melted a little bit, just making it a little bit easier for me to put these into position and get them straight. Okay, literally going to leave that there, let that dry, and I'll be back and we'll go on to the next stage. Okay, so that's pretty much dried, just there. So on this one we had this section missing, so I've got another one of these. Now it's fair to say obviously it's got paint on it, and I'm having a look at it. It's not particularly heavy paint, it's very light coat of paint, so I am literally just going to glue that on. So I'm going to glue that on to the back position so that it matches the other one. Again, just some plastic glue. Okay, so that's on there. Once again, I'm just going to let that dry. Okay, so that's drying up there, and really happy how it's looking now. Now, I did have a little concern with this one, one which is looking slightly different, and that was the back piece, because the back piece was facing the opposite way, so it was facing that way, and it just looked really odd to me. So I did take that off, and I re-glued it back on, facing the other way, because for me that's how they're supposed to look, and I think overall it gives it a much better look. So now it's just got these tiny little back pieces which are slightly different, and obviously this front section. So I'm really happy with that. So I've only just done that, so that is currently drying, so I'm going to let that all have a good dry up, and then I'll be back with the next stage. Right, so that is all dry now, so we're ready to move on to the next stage. Now the next stage is going to be actually going backwards to something I did in one of the previous videos, and that was the little driver just on here. Now let me just see if I can get a little bit closer for you. So I had to make a little compromise last time, because the driver, I didn't actually have any sort of handlebars for him, so I went with the idea of him having this like Wi-Fi remote control thing, which I was happy with. I thought it looked pretty cool, but I did have a comment from one of my subscribers who mentioned that probably Dark Eldar just wouldn't have that type of technology, you know, in the future. So he suggested about attaching that little remote to the actual radar using some guitar string. I thought that's a clever little idea, and as it was, I do actually have some spare guitar string. So I've just had a little experiment, and I've done one of them. So this is what I've done. So basically I drilled a hole in the remote control, and then I drilled a hole into the sort of underside of the seat there, and then I've super glued the wire into place, and I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to run with that. I'm going to do that on the other ones, so that is going to be my next job. So let's start off by drilling a little hole into the remote control. That's in the remote. I'm now going to go into the seat. Like so. And then to get some of my guitar wire, cut some off. And then just sort of bend it into an appropriate sort of position. It's pretty strong, this stuff. I've never really used guitar wire before. I've heard of people using it though. So now it's just a case of just bending it into the right position. That looked about right, just a slightly pinched together, I would suggest. Probably a bit of an angle. Right, there you go, that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to just bend that slightly so that's not too straight. Okay, and then try and glue that into position. So I use a bit of super glue for this because obviously it's metal. One on there, and then one on there. There you go, that looks pretty cool. Okay, so I've got one more to do. It's going to be slightly more difficult because he's got a metal remote, but that's not going to be too much of a problem. We still have our drill bit just to go in, so I'm going to do that one as well, and I'll be back when it's all done. Okay, so that is the metal one done as well. Exactly the same, just obviously a little bit more drilling just to get that hole in the metal work, but that is how he's looking. Pretty cool. So thanks very much to Graham, my subscriber, who gave me that idea. It's worked out really well. I'm very happy with it. So we are getting very close to the end of this. So the only thing left to do now is working out how we're going to put these on some bases. Okay, so on to the bases. So I've gone into my bits box. I've got 3 little flyer bases here. As a Necron and Eldar player, I usually have quite a few of these spare. So I've got 3 here ready to go. Now I have an option of potentially magnetising this onto the Raider, but to be fair, that's fairly vulnerable. They're quite big vehicles. It is doable, but if I can avoid it, then I will do so. So I'm going to use a technique which I use for my Eldar grav tanks, and that is, rather than gluing the stem or pushing the stem in, when I say the stem, I mean the tiny little thin bit of plastic on the top. Now that's the piece that normally breaks off. So I've already taken that piece off of mine already. So rather than pushing the little stem in, we're going to make the hole in the Raider slightly bigger, enabling us to push the main shaft of this flying base into the hole. So I've got one here already, so we've got a slightly bigger hole than normal, and you push it in and it pushes in quite nicely, sits quite nicely, and we have, you know, a pretty solid flying base. So that is what we're going to do. Now the second one, which is just here, exactly what I've just explained to you has happened. So someone has had their flying base in there and it's snapped off. So what we're going to have to do is drill out a hole in that. So let me just get the right camera angle, and we're going to just drill out a hole with our drill piece. Obviously we're drilling into the plastic stand, which is a harder plastic than the actual model itself, so it will take a little bit more work. It's almost like drilling into metal. Right, there we go. So that is drilled out, and now obviously, because again we're using the main shaft rather than the little tiny stem at the top, I'm going to have to make this hole a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to take my knife in there a bit just to get it a bit bigger. Okay, there's quite a lot of glue actually around this hole. Just carefully open up the hole. Once you get the hole to a certain opening, you can then get your file in there, if you've got one of these little circular files, and use that to open the hole a little bit more. Now if you want your vehicles to be at an angle rather than being flat, you can obviously go in and you can like file the hole at an angle if that's your desire. And we are getting there, I'd say just slightly bigger. And you don't want it too big, because if it's too big, then obviously the whole of the stem slips into the hole, and then you've got nowhere. There you go. That's great. Really happy with that. So that is Raider number 2 done. Now Raider number 3. This bottom section does have a major problem. It's not been glued together very well. It has a massive gap. I've tried pushing it together and gluing it, but it's where it's like a big section, it won't really bend very well, so that's not going to happen. and what tends to happen, although the hole's big enough for this to go in, it goes in at an angle, so it's just not very good at all. So what we're going to have to do is use another technique. We're going to have to fill this all with green stuff, and then we're going to make our own new hole. So I'm going to get prepared to do that, and I'll be back. Right, so I just made some green stuff up, and I've gone in and I've actually filled in the gap and the hole with the green stuff. Basically just pushed it into position. I used my little colour shaper, it's like silicone brush as such, just to keep it nice and smooth. Now, my original idea was to wait for that to dry and then drill a hole into the green stuff. But I've had a look at the other Raiders that we've got, and the way the hole is, it's not actually in a central position. The central position is actually slightly off the hole, which is pretty useful, because what it means is I can actually use my drill piece, and rather than drilling into the green stuff that we've just put in there, I can just move it slightly forward and drill into the plastic itself. So that is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to basically drill into there, just like I did on the last Raider, drill into there, make it a little bit bigger, just so that that base just slides in and is in a nice, like, solid position. And then once that's done, then that is the last piece to be done. So I shall do that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you these Raiders all finished. Right, there you go. So I have finished. So just quickly show you what I did on that last section. So basically, yeah, just made the hole in there. Now it looks like it's on the green stuff, but it's not. It's actually directly in the plastic, which means when I push this in, I get a really nice, strong fitting, which is really good. Just show you this one a bit closer as well. So I know the footage wasn't particularly close, so hopefully this will give you an idea of what I did. So that's the guitar string there on that little remote control. I think that looks really cool, works really well. And then I'll just show you that back piece as well. So that is how the back piece ended up looking. And again, on the whole, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I solved the issue quite well, so no complaints there from me. Okay, so of course these are all magnetised, as you've probably seen in the previous videos. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to magnetise them up from these three Raiders into the Ravagers, so you can see them in all their glory before we finish the video up. Right, there you go. So that is them in their Ravager versions. Really happy how they look. They look pretty cool, and obviously having them all interchangeable and magnetised is all really useful as well. And if you didn't see some of the previous videos, then although I've got dark lances on all of the weapon options here at the moment, they are all magnetised, so I can change them up. So this guy, for example, he's magnetised standing on, and then his gun option is also magnetised, and that's the same for all of the men, including the front gunner. That comes off. Got the other gun options, so they're fully usable, which is really good. Okay, so that is it for this series. I really hope you enjoyed the videos. I certainly have enjoyed making them. I hope you got something from them. And as always, of course, thank you for watching. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for your likes and comments. They do really help me out, help my channel out, so appreciate that. Right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching.